Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, fellow Toastmasters, and guests. It is my privilege to be the keynote for this evening and discuss with you the three hidden powers of digital leadership. And what I'm discussing with you tonight really isn't any secret that the digital leadership and the keys to success is really based on analog. And it's really an inside joke that analog is hinged on all things associated with basic leadership. Before I go into the details, I want to center on the dichotomy between industrial era incumbent leadership and what we call today the digital era disruptor mindset, which are in stark contrast. If you recall, a lot of the things in 20th century leadership focused on a mindset that focused mainly on the marketplace, the market player. And a lot of this centered on predictability. And the current paradigm focused on the business case and things focused on never failing. I want everything on my dashboard as a leader to be all green. I wanted things to be very predictable. I wanted speed. I wanted predictability over speed and innovation. But as you can see, in the 21st century, as we pivot away from the 20th century, we are into an era of disruption. The pandemic has showed us that we needed to be much more nimble and more dynamic, and we needed to be adaptive. We needed to create value from uncertainty. We needed to master whatever disruption was coming our way in a new environment, in a new ecosystem. So what does this mean for us? We needed to innovate. We needed to be in a mindset that allowed us to be okay with problem solving on our feet and to be tolerant of failing fast. The focus was on innovation and speed over predictability. So in the context of leadership powers for shaping behavior, the first thing I like to focus on is context. And I'd like to tell you a little story about how context is very important. In 1973, Princeton University researchers John Darley and Daniel Batson devised an experiment, and they were notorious with this experiment, to see what factors most influenced whether a person would stop and help a stranger slumped and groaning in the street. The subjects were seminary students who were informed that they were on their way to give a very important speech in another building across campus. The experiment ran on three conditions: whether the student spent time preparing a speech on the Good Samaritan, which is a parable about helping strangers, or on an unrelated topic, whether the student had joined the seminary to serve others or for personally motivated reasons, and whether they were told that they were running late for their speech or had time to prepare, or to spare. By a large margin, telling the students that they were late had the biggest effect on whether or not they stopped to help. The percentage of helpers plummeted from 63% to 10%, and even those who personality-wise were more motivated to help others, and those who were primed with thoughts of the Good Samaritans were much more likely to walk on by if they were in a hurry. So think about that. Strong context shape behavior. Time pressures is an example of a strong context. A situation that can make people act counter to their own values, their own goals, or natural inclinations. For example, a project manager up against a deadline may make quality compromises they would not normally accept. If you're not very convinced of this, of a transformative potential of time pressure, watch your own driving behaviors the next time you're late for an appointment. Other drivers of strong context are role expectations and the key performance indicators or KPIs and the metrics against which people are rewarded. Asking someone to innovate is unlikely to succeed if their bonus and career success is determined only by on-time, on-budget operational performance. To start, you have to look at 3 common areas of entrenched context and use the techniques that follow to begin reframing. Do people assume that only those in specific roles are entitled to give their ideas and opinions? If someone expresses an unpopular opinion, are they argued down? Do executives believe their industry or organization won't be affected by digital disruptions? The next thing I'd like to talk about is language. Leadership powers for shaping behavior in terms of language. Language that motivates the right attitudes and aspirations. Language of goals, strategies, and plans. How do you describe success in your organization? Do you use the metaphors of sports and war? Beating the competition or winning a target market? In some cases, that may motivate the appropriate behavior, but in others, it may focus attention on playing the game. And if you're playing the game, you're going to be doing it in other companies' terms, rather than creating your own vision for success. Language that emphasizes in delighting the customer or helping team members to excel or promote a customer-centric or user-centric view that will promote and drive thinking towards an open-ended opportunity of value. The goals and objectives emphasized by your choice of language help provide strong context that shapes people's actions and attitudes. What is the overarching strategy of your organization? Are you catching up, for example, if you're a CIO, to modernize your technology environment? Are you, as the CEO, driving your business to match customer experience and expectations? Are you in a service organization that keeps the business running? Are you the strategic partner that enables to describe IT's role within a business? Always catching up, driving the business, the service organization, the strategic partner, setting the tone with the organization and the business? By extension, your words describe the value of the IT organization or the employees to the business. How do you describe your strategic plan? If you're the CIO or the CTO, or even the chief digital officer and the C-level, how does your strategic plan follow a similar meaning? How does a naming convention along the lines of IT services strategic plan 2017 to 2020 What does that mean? What if instead you called it something else? What if we called it an enabling strategic plan as of a certain date? Words mean something. Just relabeling conveys three important messages, both within what your organization and with your executive team. Because you're part of the business, you and your team enable the business to accomplish X, Y, and Z, whatever your mission and business objectives are, and you understand the strategic plans and the need to be dynamic. I'd like to talk next about presenting facts in a feel-safe manner. Whenever you're talking to your team, you have to do so in such a way that doesn't drive them away, especially when you're discussing language about people. Language, the use of words, can be thought of as a potential threat that causes a fight or flight mentality, especially within your team. And if you're an executive in a position of power, language and words do mean things. And doing so and presenting facts in a feel-safe manner conveys a lot to that team that you're leading. Take a look at the far left about fact-based statements. For example, sales figures are down by 20%. How is that conveyed to those in the trenches doing the work? You're not doing a good enough job in managing the sales pipeline. How could you make an alternative feel-safe approach? Take a look at the far right. What can we do about it? How can I support you in that? Can you help me understand these sales figures? These are things that we as leaders can do to make language about people. Because we as leaders have to choose our words very carefully in order to make our teammates valued. The language about people. What job titles, what labels do we take about our staff members? What do they mean to us? So presenting facts in a feel-safe manner and also language about our teammates mean a lot. Are they, when it comes to our people and our resources within our organization, are they system administrators? Or are they cast members like in Disney? Are they system engineers? Or are they inventors like in Brazilada? How do you describe employees of the business? Are they a headcount? Are they digital talent, skills? Each of these labels mean things. And if you're an organization that's very large, it can dehumanize an individual that actually does the work. I'd like to now talk about the language of activities. When technology disrupts and upends business models, have you talked about the change that needs to change? Focusing on the end, the state or the vision can be important in creating a sense of identity for the teams and in maintaining their motivation. How we talk about the way we can get work done can matter. For example, Robert Rickman, a former culture strategist at Zappos, suggested that eliminating the use or the phrase best practices, because it suggests that those practices are plug and play, using them without evaluating whether they need to be customized when working with the business leaders are trying to get in or developing relationships. If you use lean methods, do you actually describe the methodology as hypothesize, test, experiment, and fail fast? Why not used a methodology as hypothesize, test, experiment, and learn fast. So if you take words and present them in such a way that you take the problem and you flip it to a failure or from a failure and into a learning mode, you can actually grow together. And this brings me to my next topic, using language to reduce change aversion. In terms of expressions of conflict, repeated complaints, this thing is broken and needs to be fixed before I can do my work. Or the assignment of blame, it's all they're usually meaning, and someone outside the speaker's own group is fault. There is nothing we could do about it. These are things that we can do to actually flip and pivot away from. We can also take as countermeasures and actually flip it and say, hey, what are the concerns? What are the responsibilities? What are the priorities? What are the hypotheses? What's the appreciation and collaboration? So using language to reduce change aversion are other ways to change and flip things so that we as leaders can use language to identify and overcome change aversion. The next thing I'd like to cover are habits. Research shows that 40% to 45% of what we as humans do every day is a habit, meaning that what we do has some activity without giving it much thought or intellectual attention. Employees are very excellent at forming the most efficient habits to have mastery over their roles. Habits form the third mutually reinforcing element of the hidden powers. Because of the repetitive, subconscious nature, habits can strengthen a context in unintended directions. And a strong context can lead to the creation of particular habits. As we saw in our discussion of language, the habits of the language we also use shape the context and ultimately the way we think and the way we view the world. Continued conversations, our conservative nature, validate and perpetuate the culture versus the discussions that we use, phrases such as our desire to change and how we evolve. C-level leaders introducing changes of any sort into their environments often counter the same change aversion response from their staff and teams. In the past, we have tended to unfairly label response as a change resistance. Change resistance implies a level of willfulness or intention that is not accurate for those affected. Change aversion is a response that originates from tension between a person's emotional perception and their rational reasoning. And although the human brain favors forming habits, and although 40 to 45% of what we do every day is a habit, and this can make us appear change resistant, all this goes into a response, a reward, and a cue and a trigger. The old way lures with expertise and productivity. The new way can inspire a call to action. Although the old way feels like an open highway with predictability, almost like the Autobahn, the new way feels like that mountain bike trail on a foggy day. And though biases that affects habits are based on cognitive bias, and that change aversion is that response, that tension between a person's emotional perception and irrational reasoning. And we have to overcome all of these cognitive biases: the anchoring bias, the backfire bias, the Barnum effect, the Benjamin Franklin effect, the confirmation bias, the Dunning-Kruger effect, the Semmelweis reflex, the cognitive dissonance. All of these things affect the way we as leaders are adverse to change. But in closing, if we pay attention to these little cues, these three superpowers to overcome the changes, these small changes, these small steps that we need to take, we can make big changes in the end. These small habits lead to success. Thank you very much.